There is a kind of noise that never stops. It is not the sound of the world around you, but the echo that lives inside the mind. It hums beneath every moment of the day, the soft turbulence of thought, worry, and remembering. Even when you close the door, turn off the phone, and shut your eyes, it follows. This noise has many voices: the unfinished conversation replaying in your head, the to-do list whispering at the edge of rest, the doubts that ask whether you have done enough, become enough, mattered enough. You tell yourself that when life slows down, you'll finally rest. But when quiet comes, it feels strange, almost unbearable. Silence presses against you like water filling a room. The absence of sound becomes its own kind of sound, magnifying the movement of your heart, the rhythm of your breath, the flicker of every passing thought. You try to relax, but something deep within resists. Because beneath the outer noise, another, older noise begins to rise, the raw vibration of what you have avoided feeling. We have built entire worlds to escape silence. Cities blaze with light through the night, voices pour endlessly from screens, notifications fill the smallest pauses between actions. Noise gives the illusion of direction, of purpose, of connection. But much of it is only an echo chamber where we hide from ourselves. We scroll, speak, perform, not because we have something to say, but because we cannot bear the weight of saying nothing. Yet every soul, sooner or later, comes to a point where the noise exhausts itself. You can only run for so long before the voice you've been avoiding catches up. Perhaps it happens in heartbreak, in loss, in the moment a dream ends and nothing stands to replace it. Perhaps it comes on an ordinary night when you sit alone and realize the stillness you sought outside cannot be found there. That is the doorway, when the outer noise fades and the inner begins to whisper. Silence is often mistaken for emptiness. But emptiness, in its truest sense, is not nothingness, it is space. And space is possibility. A cup holds water because it is hollow. A room shelters you because it is open. And the mind becomes clear only when it allows itself to be still. The practice of silence is not about muting the world. It is about listening to what remains when the world's distractions fall away. To enter silence is to face your own reflection without distortion. It requires courage, the same courage it takes to look in a mirror and truly see what's there, not what you wish to see. Think of the mind as a lake. When stirred by constant motion, the surface ripples and clouds every reflection. But when movement ceases, even briefly, the water clears. You begin to see the sky mirrored within it. That still surface does not create truth, it reveals it. So too with silence. When you stop stirring your thoughts, the light of awareness appears naturally. It was always there, only obscured by motion. Silence is the origin of all sound. Before every word there is a pause. Before every idea, a breath. Even the universe, before it expanded into galaxies, existed in stillness. Creation itself began with quiet potential. And within you, that same quiet potential waits. We often think of growth as noise, movement, effort, progress. But some of the deepest transformations happen when nothing seems to be happening at all. Seeds sprout beneath soil in darkness. Bones mend in the silence of sleep. Hearts change not in the rush of conversation, but in the long pauses that follow. The mind learns to listen only when words fall away. To embrace silence is to surrender the need to control the moment. It is to allow life to unfold at its own rhythm. At first, this feels unnatural, even frightening. Because the ego thrives on activity, it believes that without doing, it will disappear. But awareness does not depend on doing. It simply is. And silence is its native language. When you first sit in silence, the mind rebels. It starts listing everything you should be doing. It criticizes you for wasting time. It fills the space with memories, fantasies, worries, anything to avoid stillness. This is not failure. This is the unveiling of what has always been there, the ceaseless machinery of thought. You begin to realize how much energy is spent maintaining noise. And little by little, the awareness that notices the noise becomes stronger than the noise itself. There is a moment, fragile but unmistakable, when thought pauses. Not because you forced it, but because it has nothing more to say. In that gap, something vast enters: peace, presence, a sense that life is breathing through you rather than being controlled by you. It is as if you step outside time for a heartbeat. Everything is still, and in that stillness you are whole. Silence reveals what cannot be spoken. It is the canvas upon which insight paints itself. In silence, you begin to sense that behind every question you have ever asked, the answer has been quietly waiting, not as a word, but as a knowing. The problem is never that the universe is silent. The problem is that we are too loud to hear it. The modern world measures worth by noise. To be silent is often mistaken for weakness or lack of opinion. But consider, the deepest waters are silent. The strongest trees do not need to announce their strength, they simply stand. The wise speak only when words improve upon silence. When you start valuing silence, you begin to see through illusions. You recognize how much of human behavior is driven by fear of being forgotten, unseen, unheard. Noise becomes a substitute for presence. We fill the air with words because we have lost touch with meaning. But true communication begins not with speaking, but with listening, and listening begins with silence. In silence, you rediscover humility. You realize that the world does not revolve around your narrative. The sun rises and sets without your permission. The stars continue their dance indifferent to your victories or failures. And in that realization, paradoxically, you find freedom. Because you no longer need to prove anything to exist. You simply are. Silence teaches you that peace was never lost. It was only buried beneath layers of thought. It teaches you that strength is not in resistance, but in surrender. To sit quietly and feel without reacting, that is courage. To let the storm pass without trying to stop it, that is mastery. There will be times when silence feels unbearable, when every second stretches endlessly, and the urge to escape becomes overwhelming. Stay. The discomfort is the sound of walls crumbling. It is the mind learning that it no longer needs to defend itself from itself. Breathe through the restlessness, through the ache of wanting distraction. Eventually, something shifts. You begin to feel the space within silence rather than the absence within it. And then, subtly, you notice, the noise loses its authority. Thoughts still come, but they no longer drag you with them. Emotions still rise, but they move through you like wine through open air. You realize you are not the storm, you are the sky that holds it. The path to silence is not about fighting the mind, it is about befriending it. When you observe your thoughts without judgment, they begin to settle naturally. Awareness itself is the medicine. The simple act of noticing creates distance between you and the noise. That distance is the birth of peace. Imagine walking through a forest at dawn. At first, all you hear is your own footsteps, the crunch of leaves, the thud of your heartbeat. But as you slow down, other sounds emerge, the wind weaving through branches, the distant call of a bird, the delicate hush that exists between notes. You realize the forest was never silent. You were simply too loud to hear it. Such is the nature of the inner world. Silence is not isolation, it is intimacy. It reconnects you with what is real. You begin to sense the subtle rhythm behind all things, the way breath mirrors the ocean's tide, the way thought rises and falls like waves, the way stillness exists even in motion. The more you listen, the more you realize that silence is not outside you, it is what you are made of. The great teachers across time have all pointed toward this truth. Buddha found it beneath the Bodhi tree. Lao Tzu spoke of the usefulness of the empty space within the cup. Christ retreated into the desert to meet the voice of God within. Jung called it the self, the center that holds both light and shadow. Each name points to the same experience, the return to silence, to awareness, to the ground of being. When you allow yourself to enter silence, you meet yourself not as a role or identity, but as consciousness itself. You are not the thoughts you think, nor the emotions you feel, nor the history you remember. You are the presence that witnesses them all. And that realization changes everything. Because once you have touched true silence, even briefly, you can never again believe that you are only the noise. You begin to carry stillness with you into the noise of the world. You listen differently, speak differently, move differently. You respond instead of react. You notice pauses between words and find comfort there. You begin to see that every sound, every event, every encounter arises from the same quiet source, and returns to it. The mind will try to claim ownership of silence. It will want to turn it into another accomplishment, another identity. I am spiritual now. I am calm. But real silence cannot be possessed. It belongs to no one because it is what allows all things to exist. The moment you try to hold it, it slips away. The secret is to let it hold you instead. There is a sacredness in ordinary moments that only silence can reveal. The way light touches the floor. The way water moves around your hands. The way someone exhales beside you without saying a word. These are not small things, they are the fabric of life itself. In silence, they become radiant. You realize that meaning does not come from extraordinary experiences, but from the depth of your presence within simple ones. So, as you walk through your days, try pausing between tasks. Feel the breath entering and leaving your body. Notice the brief stillness at the top of each inhale, the bottom of each exhale. That pause is silence living within motion. It is always there, waiting for you to remember. The more you honor these small pauses, the more spacious life becomes. Conversations feel lighter. Decisions become clearer. You begin to sense timing, harmony, the natural flow that underlies everything. This is not magic, it is awareness. And awareness grows in silence the way roots grow in darkness. Eventually, you realize silence was never the opposite of sound. It is the background that makes sound possible. Without silence, there is no music, only noise. Without stillness, there is no movement, only chaos. Without awareness, there is no life, only reaction. To seek silence, then, is to return home. Not to escape the world, but to see it as it truly is, a dance of sound and stillness, form and emptiness, forever meeting in each moment. So the next time life feels too loud, pause. Close your eyes. Listen, not for what is missing, but for what has always been there. The faint hum beneath the hum. The pulse beneath the heartbeat. The presence that watches, patient and eternal. That is silence. And it has been waiting for you since the beginning. There comes a point in every human life where noise becomes unbearable. Not the kind that fills the streets or hums in a crowded cafe, but the inner noise. The voice that never stops explaining, planning, defending, and fearing. The chatter that narrates every move we make. And sometimes, when life feels too heavy to carry, we try to escape that noise. We reach for distractions, relationships, work, anything that will keep us from hearing ourselves. But silence waits patiently at the edge of every distraction. Like an old friend who never stopped believing we'd return. In the beginning, silence can feel hostile. It confronts us with everything we've avoided. When the noise fades, we finally hear what has been speaking to us all along. The ache we suppressed. The grief we postponed. The longing we dismissed as weakness. It's easy to believe silence is empty. But in truth, it's a mirror. It reflects the parts of us that words can't reach. And if we stay long enough, the mirror begins to soften. The pain becomes a kind of tenderness. A compassion for all the versions of ourselves that tried so hard to survive. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Silence is that awakening. It's the doorway between dreaming and knowing. Between reacting and understanding. In the modern world, silence is almost extinct. We fill every gap with sound, music, podcasts, endless scrolling. Even when we sit alone, our thumbs dance across glowing screens, afraid that stillness might expose the truth. We've forgotten how to be with ourselves. But silence has a way of calling us back, softly. It arrives after heartbreak. When words can no longer explain what we feel. It arrives after failure. When plans collapse and all we can do is breathe. It arrives in the middle of the night. When the mind finally surrenders and the soul begins to whisper. At first, silence feels like absence. Then, slowly, it begins to feel like presence. Something larger than thought, a kind of ancient intelligence, starts to move within us. And in that presence, we begin to see differently. We notice the way the air moves through the room, how light folds itself across the wall. We notice that our thoughts are not the whole of who we are. They come and go, like passing clouds. And beneath them, there is a stillness that never changes. That stillness is not something we create. It was always there. We simply stopped listening to it. When we sit in silence, the mind will protest. It will throw distractions like stones into the water. It will remind us of undone tasks, old wounds, and what might go wrong. This is not failure. This is the process of unwinding centuries of noise. Each time we return to the breath, each time we stay present with the discomfort, we reclaim a little more of our inner space. You may find, as Jung did, that silence begins to show you patterns, symbols that emerge from the deep mind. Dreams become vivid. Emotions surface in shapes and colors. The unconscious begins to speak a language older than words. This is not imagination. It's communication. Your inner world has always been trying to reach you. In silence, we don't chase answers. We allow them to reveal themselves. We realize that the things we seek, peace, clarity, meaning, do not come from control, but surrender. The philosopher Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." He wasn't condemning solitude. He was pointing toward the forgotten power that lives in it. Because when we sit quietly, truly quietly, we begin to dissolve the illusion of separation. The boundary between me and everything else starts to blur. We sense the subtle pulse of life that connects us all. And in that realization, loneliness begins to fade. Silence does not isolate you. It reunites you. It brings you back to the center, from which everything else flows. You may notice that in silence, old memories start to rise. Faces, places, feelings, all the fragments we thought were forgotten. Don't push them away. They're not interruptions. They're invitations. Each memory carries energy, waiting to be seen and released. The mind, when quiet, becomes a stage where the soul replays what it couldn't finish. Every regret, every sorrow, is a doorway back to integration. When we face them with compassion, they lose their power to haunt us. We stop reacting and start understanding. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It's the awareness within movement. When you walk, breathe, eat, or work with presence, you're not escaping life, you're entering it more deeply. And perhaps that's what silence has been trying to teach us all along. That peace is not found in running away from noise, but in learning to listen beneath it. Try this. Sit quietly for a few moments each day. No phone. No music. No agenda. Just you, the breath, and the awareness that you are here. At first, you might feel restless. But if you stay, something sacred will begin to unfold. You'll start to sense that life has always been whispering to you. Through intuition, through dreams, through the quiet pull of the heart. That whisper is your soul speaking. It doesn't shout. It never forces. It waits for silence to make space. And the more you listen, the more life begins to feel guided. You notice coincidences that seem too precise to ignore. You meet people at the exact moment you need them. You find words that echo your private thoughts. This is not chance. It's alignment. It's the universe responding to your openness. Silence is not passive. It's creative. It is the canvas on which existence paints its meaning. And when we learn to live from that quiet center, our actions become more deliberate. Our words more compassionate. Our presence more magnetic. You begin to notice that you don't need to prove or defend yourself. Because silence teaches one of the rarest forms of strength. The kind that doesn't depend on validation. It's the confidence of simply being. In a world that glorifies speed, silence invites us to slow down, to return to the rhythm of nature, which never rushes yet accomplishes everything. The tree does not strain to grow. The river does not force its flow. And still, both reach their destination. When we learn to move from silence, life feels less like a race, and more like a dance. Every step becomes meaningful. Every pause sacred. In silence, you are no longer lost in thought. You are found in being. So, when the world grows loud again, when chaos tries to pull you away, remember this. The quiet within you is never gone. It's waiting, just beneath the surface. Ready to hold you, guide you, and remind you that you were never alone. You were only distracted. Stay there. Stay in the stillness between your breaths. Because in that stillness, you are already home. There's a moment, somewhere between pain and acceptance, when the world becomes very quiet. Not because everything is fine, but because you finally stop running from what hurts. That moment is sacred. It is the first breath of healing. Silence is not just a refuge for peace. It is the medicine of the soul. It's where wounds begin to close. Not through effort, but through awareness. You see, healing doesn't happen because we fix ourselves. It happens because we finally allow ourselves to feel. And silence is the only space wide enough to hold the full weight of our emotions without judgment. For most of our lives, we've been taught to escape pain. We rush to fill the emptiness with words, people, distractions. We treat sorrow like an intruder, grief like a mistake. But what if these feelings were never enemies? What if they were messengers, arriving not to harm us, but to remind us of what we've ignored within ourselves? When you sit in silence long enough, you start to sense emotions that have waited years to be seen. Anger that was never allowed to speak. Sadness buried under strength. Fear disguised as control. They rise like waves from deep water. Sometimes fierce, sometimes gentle. But always seeking the same thing. Acknowledgement. And when we don't resist them, when we simply breathe and listen, they soften. The body unclenches. The heart begins to expand. Silence doesn't demand that we understand everything. It only asks that we stay. That's the beginning of emotional healing. Presence. To feel without running. To breathe without resisting. To let pain exist without immediately trying to fix it. Because emotions are not problems to solve. They are energy moving through the body, trying to tell a story the mind refused to hear. In silence, that story unfolds. You might feel old sadnesses you thought were gone. You might cry without knowing why. Let it happen. That's your soul washing itself clean. Jung believed that what we repress does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious, where it continues to influence us from the shadows. Silence brings those shadows into light. Not to shame us, but to liberate us. Healing isn't glamorous. It's not candlelight baths or affirmations whispered in mirrors. It's sitting in the dark with what aches, until it no longer scares you. It's letting grief breathe until it becomes gratitude. It's realizing that the parts of you tried to erase were never unworthy. They were just unheard. The ego will resist this. It doesn't like silence. It thrives on motion and noise, on identity and control. When you sit in silence, you begin to see the ego's performance for what it is. A fragile construction of thoughts, trying desperately to keep you safe, by keeping you distracted. But silence teaches you that safety was never about control. It was about trust. Trusting that the heart knows how to heal. If you stop interrupting it. Sometimes, the healing begins as exhaustion. You stop pretending to be fine. You stop chasing what doesn't nurture you. You stop apologizing for needing rest. This too is silence working through you. There's a quiet intelligence in the body. A wisdom that moves through breath and heartbeat. It knows how to mend, how to release, how to guide you back to balance. But it can only speak when the mind stops shouting. That's why silence feels like surrender. Because it is. It's the moment you stop trying to be stronger than your pain. And instead, you let life hold you. And slowly, as you surrender, something inside begins to shift. The tears that once burned now cleanse. The fear that once tightened your chest becomes a doorway to courage. The ache that once made you feel small becomes the very space through which light enters. Leonard Cohen wrote, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." Silence reveals those cracks. Not to expose your weakness, but to remind you where light belongs. You begin to see that healing is not about returning to who you were. It's about becoming who you are without the armor. And sometimes, silence shows you that healing isn't loud or visible. It's quiet, like moss growing on stone. It happens slowly, secretly. As you start to speak to yourself with gentleness, you'll know it's happening. When you no longer need to explain your pain to others. When peace becomes more important than being understood. When solitude feels nourishing instead of lonely. That's when silence becomes your teacher. And pain becomes your initiation. The truth is, silence and pain have always known each other. Pain creates space. Silence fills it with meaning. You may notice that as you heal, you become less reactive. The world no longer pulls you in every direction. You start to respond, rather than react. You listen before speaking. You breathe before deciding. That's the wisdom silence cultivates. Not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. Because silence doesn't numb you. It sensitizes you. You start noticing subtleties. The texture of emotions. The rhythm of your thoughts. The way the air changes before a storm. This awareness grounds you. It reminds you that you are more than your experiences. Every emotion is a visitor, not a permanent resident. It comes to show you something, then leaves when the lesson is complete. Silence gives them space to come and go without resistance. If you let silence become your daily practice, you'll notice that your relationship with pain transforms. It no longer feels like punishment. It feels like purification. Not because it disappears, but because you begin to see its purpose. Grief teaches you to cherish. Fear teaches you to protect what matters. Loneliness teaches you to connect more deeply. Anger teaches you to set boundaries. Every emotion has a gift hidden inside it. Silence unwraps those gifts. Healing in silence is not isolation. It's reunion. It's remembering that you were never truly broken, only fragmented by noise. When silence enters your life, it doesn't erase your past. It weaves it into wisdom. It turns your scars into scripture. It lets you tell your story without trembling. And one day, you'll find yourself sitting in quiet again. Not because you're avoiding the world, but because peace has become your home. You'll look around and realize that the same world which once felt hostile now feels gentle. You'll listen to the wind and hear a conversation. You'll close your eyes and feel life humming beneath your ribs. And you'll understand. You were never healing towards something. You were healing back to yourself. Silence doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've always been. So, if you find yourself in a season of solitude, if your heart feels heavy and your words feel too small, don't rush to fill the silence. Sit in it. Let it wash over you. Let it hold you until you remember. That stillness was never emptiness. It was presence. The presence of everything you needed. But we're too busy to feel. Because when silence becomes your companion, you stop seeking healing in others. You find it in breath, in awareness, in the sacred rhythm of simply being alive. And that, perhaps, is the quiet miracle of existence. That healing was never something you had to search for. It was waiting for you. In the space between one heartbeat and the next. In the silence that has been whispering your name all along. There comes a point on every inner journey when silence deepens into stillness. And stillness is not merely the absence of sound. It is the slowing of time itself. The mind quiets. The body softens. Thoughts, once sharp and restless, begin to dissolve like salt in water. And what remains is something pure, unhurried, vast. Stillness is the stage where transformation takes place. Not through action or control, but through surrender. We are conditioned to believe that change is achieved by effort, that healing requires struggle, that peace is something we earn after enough work. But stillness reveals a deeper truth. That real transformation doesn't come from doing, but from allowing. When a seed transforms into a tree, it doesn't force itself upward. It simply rests in the dark soil, trusting the unseen forces at work. It doesn't panic when it cannot see the light. It allows stillness to shape it, to break it open in silence, so that something greater can emerge. The same is true for us. When you stop fighting your stillness, when you stop rushing to fix the silence, you begin to notice that something gentle is unfolding inside you. Not a grand awakening, but a slow blooming. The quiet return of presence. Stillness is the space where the self rearranges itself, where chaos settles into order, where the unconscious and the conscious meet. Not as enemies, but as partners in evolution. The mind, once cluttered with noise, begins to reveal its natural clarity, like muddy water that clears when left undisturbed. Jung often spoke of the process of individuation, the lifelong path of integrating all parts of oneself into wholeness. Stillness is that integration in motionless form. It is the psyche remembering itself. You see, we often seek transformation as an escape. We want to change because we are tired of who we are. We imagine a future self, calmer, wiser, stronger, and chase it endlessly. But stillness teaches that transformation is not escape. It is arrival. It is coming home to what has always been within you, hidden beneath the noise of striving. When you stop trying to become something else, you begin to see what you already are. That's when the shift happens. Stillness transforms you not by adding, but by removing. It strips away false narratives. It loosens the grip of fear. It dissolves the masks you thought you needed to survive. And beneath all that, you find something ancient, something peaceful. A presence that has been there all along. Watching, waiting, loving you. This is why silence can feel unsettling at first. It begins to dismantle illusions. The stories you told yourself about who you must be. The identities you built to earn love. The fears that defined your choices. All begin to unravel. The ego resists this. It calls it boredom. It calls it loneliness. But what you're feeling is not emptiness. It's spaciousness. The vast, open field where transformation occurs. Think of stillness as a sacred fire. Whatever cannot withstand truth will burn away, leaving only what is real. And what remains is something the mind cannot manufacture. A kind of serenity that doesn't depend on external conditions. The calm of knowing that you are enough, even when you are doing nothing. In the stillness, you begin to notice the world differently. The breeze feels alive. Colors seem deeper. Even ordinary sounds, footsteps, birds' breath, carry a certain music. Because when the mind is quiet, reality itself starts to speak. You realize that silence is not the absence of life. It is the pulse beneath it. Stillness reveals this pulse, reminding you that you were never separate from it. There is a kind of intelligence in stillness. A guidance that doesn't come from thought. It speaks softly, through intuition, through synchronicities, through the gentle tug in your chest that says, this way. When you live from that place, you stop chasing answers. You start listening. Listening to what life is showing you. Listening to what your emotions whisper before they shout. Listening to what the silence between two heartbeats is trying to teach. And in that listening, transformation happens naturally. You no longer force your way forward. You grow into it. Stillness is not stagnation. It's gestation. It's the sacred pause before a new phase of being. Every ending in your life, a loss, a heartbreak, a letting go, carries this stillness between chapters. A space that feels empty at first, but is actually fertile. The seed breaks before it sprouts. The heart cracks before it opens. The silence before dawn always feels longest. And yet it is the most sacred. If you can trust that stillness, transformation becomes effortless. You no longer demand that life make sense. You simply stay present long enough for it to reveal its rhythm. Stillness will test you. It will confront your impatience. It will ask you to release your need for immediate resolution. But it will also reward you with wisdom deeper than any understanding words can give. It will show you that there is a difference between knowing and being. The mind knows things. Stillness becomes them. And slowly, the boundaries between you and the world begin to fade. You no longer see yourself as separate from what happens. You realize that you are not just in life. You are life, expressing itself through this form, this name, this brief experience of you. That realization is the true alchemy of stillness. Because once you've touched that, you can no longer be who you were. You can play your roles, but you won't mistake them for your identity. You can face pain, but you won't drown in it. You can hold joy, but you won't cling to it. You move through life with a kind of quiet grace. Steady, compassionate, awake. And this is the paradox of stillness. By doing nothing, you become everything you were meant to be. Stillness transforms not through addition, but through remembrance. It reminds you of the truth you've always carried. That you are not broken. You are becoming. Becoming whole. Becoming real. Becoming conscious. And when you reach that point, when silence no longer feels like emptiness, when stillness feels like home, you realize something profound. There was never anything to find. There was only something to return to. Yourself. The one who was always waiting beneath the noise, beneath the striving, beneath the endless search for meaning. Stillness brings you back to that center. To the quiet, infinite awareness that has watched every storm pass, without ever being moved. This is what transformation truly means. Not becoming something new, but remembering who you were before the world told you otherwise. Stillness doesn't ask you to escape your life. It asks you to inhabit it completely. To be fully present in the small things. The breath. The light. The moment before a thought arises. Because when you truly live in stillness, you realize that life has always been whispering its lessons. It was never hiding. It was waiting for you to listen. And maybe that's the final secret silence wants to teach. That transformation was never a destination. It was a way of seeing. A quiet, sacred way of being. There comes a moment, after you've sat long enough in silence, when something subtle begins to shift. You start to feel the pulse of life. Not as something outside of you, but as something you're woven into. This is the beginning of presence. Presence is not concentration. It's not an effort to focus. It's not a technique or a goal. Presence is what remains. When you stop trying to manage the moment, it is the quiet awareness that simply is. For most of our lives, we exist half a step ahead of where we are. Thinking about what's next. Worrying about what's behind. Moving through our days like sleepwalkers. Lost in the fog of thought. We touch the world but rarely feel it. We see faces but rarely see the souls behind them. We breathe but forget that breath itself is a miracle. Presence is the awakening from that fog. It is the rediscovery of life as it actually is. Unfolding right here, in this very second. The mind loves to make noise about the past and future. But presence exists only now. And when you enter it, something ancient within you sighs in relief. You realize you were never meant to live in constant analysis. You were meant to be. To feel the warmth of sunlight. The taste of morning air. The rhythm of your heartbeat. And the soft hum of existence beneath everything. Presence is the sacred pause between experience and reaction. It's what allows you to see life without the filters of judgment. When you are present, You don't label moments as good or bad. You simply witness them as they arise and fall. Like waves dissolving on the shore. You begin to notice that emotions, too, are just movements of energy. Temporary visitors passing through your awareness. Anger, sadness, joy, anxiety. They come, they stay, they leave. But you, the one who witnesses them, remain untouched. That realization is freedom. Because when you can sit with an emotion, without needing to fix or escape it, you reclaim your power. You stop being dragged by the current, and instead become the ocean that holds it all. That's the quiet power of presence. It doesn't fight life. It allows it. And in that allowing, everything begins to change. People often believe that presence is passive. That to be still, to let go, is to do nothing. But presence is not inactivity. It's attentiveness. It's the sharpness of awareness. That makes every act, no matter how small, meaningful. When you wash your hands, you feel the water, the warmth, the texture of the soap. You are not lost in thought. You are here. When you walk, you feel your feet touching the ground. When you listen, you truly hear. Not just the words, but the pauses between them. Presence turns the ordinary sacred. It transforms routine into ritual. When you live with presence, the world stops being something you pass through and becomes something you participate in. You start to realize life was never waiting to be discovered. It was waiting to be noticed. In the quiet power of presence, you also begin to understand love differently. True love is presence. Not possession, not projection, not longing, but pure, undivided attention. To love someone in presence is to see them fully, to hold them in awareness, without trying to change or define them. It is to witness the soul beneath the personality, and say, I see you, and you are safe here. That is what every heart secretly longs for. Not to be fixed or adored, but to be seen. Presence heals because it restores that connection. First with yourself, then with others, and finally with the whole of existence. When you are present, you begin to sense the interwoven nature of all things. How your breath is shared with the trees. How your heartbeat echoes the rhythm of the earth. How your awareness and the world are not two separate realities, but two expressions of the same consciousness. This realization brings humility. It softens you. It makes you gentle in ways you never knew you could be. Because you no longer need to dominate life. You simply live it. Fully. Consciously. Compassionately. The quiet power of presence also reveals something else. That you have always been guided. In the noise of the world, you miss the whispers of intuition. The small, subtle nudges of wisdom that rise from stillness. But when you live in presence, those whispers grow louder. You start to feel when something is right. Not because it fits your logic, but because it feels true. Presence aligns you with what is real. It makes decisions flow naturally. It removes the tension of overthinking and replaces it with clarity born from awareness. You begin to realize that the present moment is not a stepping stone to something better. It is the destination. Right now. This breath. This sound. This heartbeat. It's all there is. And somehow, that's enough. When you truly inhabit this truth, life simplifies. You stop chasing, comparing, competing. You stop rushing to the next thing. Because you understand that the only real moment you will ever have is this one. That's the quiet power that no storm can touch. Because presence is not built on circumstances. It is rooted in awareness itself. And awareness cannot be broken. It cannot be lost. It simply is. This is why spiritual teachers, mystics, and philosophers have spoken of the now as the gateway to truth. Because the now is not a moment in time. It is the timeless field in which all moments arise. When you rest there, you realize that peace was never something to find. It was what remained. When you stop searching, Presence doesn't erase your human experiences. It deepens them. You still laugh, cry, fall, heal. But you do so consciously. You stop identifying with the temporary. You begin to live from the eternal. In presence, forgiveness becomes natural. You no longer hold grudges. Because you see that those who hurt you were acting from their own unconsciousness. You see the wounded child behind the harsh words, the fear behind the anger. And from this seeing, compassion arises. Not as an effort, but as a natural expression of understanding. Presence brings patience. Because when you're not rushing toward the future, you can finally wait. You can sit in uncertainty, without collapsing into anxiety. You can trust the timing of life. Because you are no longer measuring it against the pace of your expectations. Presence brings gratitude. Not the kind that demands lists or rituals, but the quiet realization that nothing is missing. That in this breath, in this room, in this moment, you have enough. You are enough. This kind of gratitude is not a thought. It's a state of being. It rises naturally when the mind becomes silent and awareness returns home. And perhaps most beautifully, presence makes you available to wonder again. The child in you, the one who once saw magic in the mundane, wakes up. You begin to notice the play of light on the floor, the delicate hum of evening air, the infinite beauty in the simplicity of being alive. Presence turns existence into art. Every breath becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of now. And in that still awareness, you begin to sense the divine, not as something distant, but as the very fabric of this moment. You realize that God, or consciousness, or the universe, whatever name you give it, has always been speaking in silence, through the rain, through laughter, through every inhale and exhale. And the only thing that was ever required was your presence. Because to be present is to participate in creation itself. It is to live, fully awake, in the infinite unfolding of now. This is the quiet power of presence. It doesn't make you extraordinary. It makes you real. It anchors you in truth so deeply that even chaos becomes sacred. And when you reach this understanding, you no longer seek meaning. You live it. Because presence is meaning. Presence is peace. Presence is love. In its purest, wordless form. And so, as you listen to this stillness now, as you breathe, as you exist, know this. You are not separate from the presence you seek. You are it. You always have been. You are the quiet power that observes, feels, and becomes life itself. And maybe, just maybe, that realization is the greatest act of awakening there is. There is a kind of listening that has nothing to do with sound. It is not about the ears, or even about words. It is the listening of the soul. A quiet attunement to the rhythm beneath all things. Most of us have forgotten how to listen in this way. We hear, but we do not receive. We respond, but we do not understand. Our lives are filled with noise, the chatter of thought, the hum of expectation, the endless pulse of distraction. And yet, somewhere beneath that, life is whispering to us all the time. Not in sentences, not in obvious signs, but in sensations, synchronicities, intuitions, subtle ripples in the still pond of awareness. The art of listening to life begins when you become quiet enough to notice them. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of attention. When your mind becomes still, everything begins to speak. The wind carries messages. The pause between words becomes meaningful. The way light falls on a wall. The timing of a meeting. The sudden tug in your chest. It all starts to form a language beyond logic. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Listening to life is how we begin that conversation. It's how we hear what the unconscious has been trying to tell us all along. Sometimes it speaks through dreams. Sometimes through conflict. Sometimes through the ache of something missing. Life doesn't always whisper gently. Sometimes it shouts through pain, through endings, through the things we try to avoid. The question is never whether life is speaking. It's whether we are listening. In silence, you begin to hear how life moves through you. You notice how your body reacts to certain people, how your heart tightens when you stray from truth, how your breath deepens when you're aligned with something real. These are not random feelings. They are the compass of the soul, the intuitive guidance system that modern life has taught us to ignore. We were trained to listen outward, to experts, authorities, trends, traditions. We were told to trust what's loud, what's certain, what's measurable. But life is rarely loud. Its wisdom arrives like dawn. Slow, soft, inevitable. To listen to life, you must slow to its pace. You must unlearn the habit of rushing toward clarity. Because clarity doesn't come from forcing answers. It comes from allowing space. When you stop searching for what to do next, you make room to hear what life is already showing you. The right path doesn't need to be chased. It reveals itself when you're still enough to see it. Listening is not passive. It is an act of deep participation. To listen is to surrender control. To let life move first. It's to say, I don't need to figure everything out right now. I trust that life is speaking. And I am willing to hear. This is the beginning of inner alignment. When you listen, truly listen, you start to sense that everything, the moments, the mistakes, the coincidences, is connected. You begin to see patterns. Noticing how one event gently leads to another. How pain became a teacher. How loss made room for something unexpected. You start to sense a dialogue unfolding between you and existence itself. It's like the universe has always been talking. But you were too busy shouting to notice. When you listen, you begin to live in cooperation with life instead of resistance to it. You stop pushing so hard. You begin to respond rather than react. A river does not fight to flow. It simply follows its nature. Listening to life is learning to become like that river. Trusting that what you are drawn toward is what you were meant to experience. But this kind of listening requires courage. Because what life tells you is not always what your ego wants to hear. Sometimes it says, let go. Sometimes it says, wait. Sometimes it says nothing at all. And in that silence, you are invited to learn patience. There's a maturity that comes with being able to wait without anxiety. To trust the unfolding without needing constant reassurance. That is true listening. Not waiting for confirmation, but living in attunement. Listening to life also means listening to others. But not just to their words. Listen to their pauses. Their tone. The space between what they say. You will begin to hear their fear. Their longing. Their love. Things words often hide. Every person, like every moment, is a teacher. Some teach through kindness. Others through difficulty. But all reveal something when met with awareness. In the art of listening, there are no enemies. Only mirrors. Every interaction reflects back something you are ready to see. Every silence invites you to hear more deeply. And perhaps the most profound silence of all is the one between your own thoughts. In that gap, in that breath of awareness between one thought and the next, there is a doorway. A direct connection to presence itself. That's where insight arises. That's where intuition speaks. Most people believe intuition is mystical. A mysterious voice from nowhere. But it's not mystical. It's natural. It's the intelligence of stillness. It's what happens when you're quiet enough to hear the deeper current beneath reason. The more you trust that inner knowing, the more clearly it guides you. It's like learning to tune a radio. At first, the signal is faint. You hear static, fragments of meaning. But as you keep listening, as you keep returning to silence, the signal strengthens. Soon, what was once unclear becomes unmistakable. Intuition isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It simply knows. It feels like calm certainty. A subtle, grounded clarity that doesn't need proof. When you follow it, life begins to flow more effortlessly. Opportunities align. Synchronicities increase. And you realize this was never coincidence. It was communication. Listening to life means you begin to hear how connected everything is. A word from a stranger. A song on the radio. A sudden memory. Each can be part of the same sentence life is writing for you. But you must read between the lines. You must listen between the sounds. There's a great peace in realizing you don't have to force the world to make sense. You only have to listen to it long enough. In stillness, life becomes a kind of music. And like any melody, it has crescendos and silences. Tension and release. Sorrow and beauty intertwined. The pauses between notes are just as essential as the notes themselves. Without silence, there is no rhythm. So too with our lives. The pauses, the still moments, the times when nothing seems to move. Those are not mistakes. They are part of the rhythm. They are where the next movement gathers strength. When you listen to life, you begin to trust that even in stillness, something is happening. You don't have to fill the silence. You only have to be awake within it. To listen in this way is to live in relationship with the present moment. It's to treat every experience as communication. Not random, not meaningless, but infused with purpose, however subtle. Sometimes, that purpose is simply to make you slow down. To rest. To notice. To breathe. Every time you pause to truly listen, you return to alignment with life's intelligence. You reconnect to something vast, something ancient. The same intelligence that tells trees when to bloom, and rivers when to turn. When you live in this kind of harmony, you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What is life asking of me right now?" That question changes everything. It moves you from control to cooperation, from striving to surrender. And in that surrender, paradoxically, you find your greatest strength. Because life is not separate from you. It is expressing itself as you. Listening to it is listening to yourself. Not the small self of the mind, but the larger self that includes everything. So when silence arrives, don't rush to fill it. Sit with it. Ask it, "What are you showing me?" When confusion comes, don't panic. Ask it, "What truth are you hiding beneath your noise?" When pain appears, don't resist it. Ask it, "What are you trying to teach me?" Everything in life wants to be understood. And understanding begins with listening. This is the art of listening to life. To live as though every moment carries meaning. To receive each experience as guidance. To walk through the world with ears of the soul open wide. When you master this art, you no longer feel lost. Because even when you don't know what's next, you trust that life does. And that trust, that quiet, unshakable faith in the wisdom of the unfolding, is what turns ordinary existence into a sacred journey. The art of listening is, at its core, the art of being alive. Because when you truly listen, you are not separate from life anymore. You are life, listening to itself. There comes a moment, somewhere deep along the quiet path, when you realize that everything you were searching for has been inside you all along. It's not a sudden revelation. It's not dramatic or loud. It arrives like a sunrise, so gentle that you only notice it. When you see how everything has been illuminated, you begin to understand that healing was never about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you already are. Wholeness was never lost, only hidden beneath layers of noise, fear, and forgetting. Silence, solitude, and stillness. They have not been your escape. They have been your way home. When you spend enough time in silence, you start to see how fragmented the self had become. Pieces of you scattered across the timelines of memory. The child who wasn't heard. The lover who wasn't seen. The dreamer who was told to be realistic. You start to feel them again. Each fragment calls softly from the depths of your awareness, asking to be acknowledged, asking to be held. And slowly, through patience and presence, You begin to gather them back. This is the quiet work of wholeness. Not fixing yourself. Not perfecting yourself. But including every part of you. In the vast embrace of understanding, you realize that your anger was never the enemy. It was the voice of a boundary you had long ignored. Your sadness wasn't weakness. It was love longing for expression. Even your fear was just a part of you, trying to keep you safe. In a world that sometimes wasn't. When you stop pushing these parts away, you stop living in conflict with yourself. You become whole again. Not because everything is light, but because you've made peace with the dark. Wholeness isn't about perfection. It's about integration. It's when the shadow no longer needs to hide. Because it has been seen, understood, and welcomed back into the heart. The return to wholeness is not an achievement. It is a remembering. You begin to see that there was never truly a broken you. Only a disconnected you. You had built walls to survive. Now you are learning to build bridges to live. Every silence, every still moment, every tear that softened your edges, was guiding you back to this place. A place where you can sit with yourself and not feel incomplete. The search begins to quiet. The constant reaching for meaning, for validation, for answers. It softens. Because you start to see that life was never asking you to figure it all out. It was asking you to participate in it, to feel it fully, to experience it as it unfolds. You begin to trust again. Not in outcomes, but in presence. You stop chasing control and start cultivating connection. It's a subtle but powerful shift. From striving to belonging. From trying to fix life. To realizing you were never separate from it. That's what wholeness feels like. Not constant joy, but deep coherence. A sense that even in pain, you are still within the rhythm of something vast and intelligent. You no longer divide your experience into good and bad. You begin to see that everything has a place. Even confusion has its purpose. To slow you down. To humble you. To invite curiosity. Even endings have their meaning. To make room for what's next. To remind you that all forms are temporary. But essence endures. This understanding brings a softness to the way you live. You no longer resist what is. You begin to meet life with a quiet kind of faith. Faith not in something external, but in the living intelligence that breathes through everything. The same intelligence that made the stars, the oceans, the silence inside you. To return to wholeness is to see yourself as part of that. Not separate. Not unworthy. Not behind. Just another expression of the same mystery. When you walk through the world with this awareness, even ordinary moments become sacred. The sound of your own breathing feels like prayer. The way light touches a leaf feels like a conversation. Even your solitude feels alive. Because you realize you are never truly alone. Life is within you, around you, and through you. It speaks in every moment. And silence is how you listen. Wholeness is not something you achieve. It's the natural state that reveals itself. When you stop fighting what is. It's the moment you say, I will no longer abandon myself. And when you stop abandoning yourself, you stop abandoning life. Because they are the same thing. To return to wholeness is to make peace with your humanity. Your imperfection. Your uncertainty. Your tenderness. It is to allow yourself to feel again. Without fear that feeling will break you. It's to realize that vulnerability was never your weakness. It was your gateway to depth, to intimacy, to truth. You stop needing to prove your worth. You stop needing to chase love. Because you finally understand. Love was never outside you. It was the thread that held you together all along. And so, when silence visits you now, you no longer fear it. You welcome it like an old friend. Because you know. Within silence, you meet yourself. Within stillness, you remember what you are. It's here that you begin to see others differently too. You stop needing to fix or save them. You begin to listen. truly listen. Because you understand that every soul is on its own journey back to wholeness. You become gentler with the world. Because you've become gentler with yourself. You speak less. But when you do, your words carry the weight of presence. You give more. But without losing yourself in the giving. You love deeper. But without the fear of losing that love. Because when you have returned to yourself, love is no longer something you seek. It is something you are. There's a stillness that follows this realization. Not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of peace. A quiet resting in your own being. You stop running. You stop trying to arrive. Because you realize you are already home. The journey inward was never about finding a better version of yourself. It was about dissolving everything that made you forget your own light. In the end, silence was your teacher, solitude your guide, and stillness your mirror. They didn't show you something new. They showed you what was always there. Beneath the noise, beneath the masks, beneath the endless striving. The self you have always been. The self that is not afraid to be seen. The self that is whole. Even when life feels broken. And maybe that's what enlightenment really is. Not floating above the world, but standing firmly within it. Eyes open. Heart open. Completely here. To live as wholeness is to live with reverence. To see the sacred in the simple. The divine in the ordinary. The infinite in the moment. You begin to realize that the present is not just time. It is presence itself. And when you inhabit that presence, you no longer feel the need to escape life. Because you are finally living it. This is the quiet revolution of consciousness. Not a sudden burst of light, but a gradual unfolding into truth. The more you listen, the more you align, the more life begins to live itself through you. And as it does, you see that the boundaries between you and life dissolve. There is only awareness, only being, only the simple miracle of existence breathing itself through form. That is wholeness. That is home. So let this silence remain with you. Not as emptiness, but as fullness. Let it remind you that everything you seek, everything you need, everything you are, has always been right here. In this breath, in this moment, in this listening. The journey ends where it began. Within. And now, when the world grows loud again, you'll know where to return. You'll know how to find your center. You'll know that silence is not a place you visit. It is what you are. So rest here for a while. Let the stillness hold you. Let life breathe through you. And when you open your eyes again, walk gently. Speak softly. Listen deeply. Because you, the listener, the seeker, the one who remembers, you have returned to wholeness. Take a slow breath. Let the air move through you, in and out, soft and unhurried. You've traveled far. Not across oceans or mountains, but through the inner landscapes that most people never see. You have walked through silence, sat with your shadows, listened to the language of stillness, and touched the quiet edge of your own soul. Now you stand here, not as someone who has learned something new, but as someone who has remembered. Remembered what it means to be still, to be present, to be whole. The noise of the world will come again. It always does. The rush of deadlines, the hum of conversation. The constant demand to be something, to prove, to strive, to move. But now you carry something they cannot touch. An inner space untouched by chaos. A center that remains unshaken. A quiet confidence born not from control, but from surrender. That is the gift of silence. It does not erase the storms. It teaches you how to move through them with grace. It does not promise constant peace. It teaches you where to find it. Within the folds of your own awareness. Every time you pause. Between two thoughts. Between two breaths. Between two choices. You touch eternity. You feel, even for a moment, The vastness that lives behind your personality, behind your fears, behind everything you think you are. And in that space, there is no separation, no striving, no need to become. There is only being. That is the home you've been looking for. Not a destination in time, but a presence within you. When silence becomes your teacher, it doesn't speak in words. It speaks through understanding, through insight that blooms without effort, through peace that asks for nothing. You realize that solitude is not loneliness. It is communion. It's where you meet the infinite within yourself. It's where you stop asking life to be different and start listening to what it has been saying all along. In the quiet, you understand. Nothing was ever missing. You were simply too distracted to notice the completeness already here. So as this reflection fades, and you return to your life, to your routines, your relationships, your daily moments, carry this silence with you. Let it be the pause before you react. Let it be the breathe before you speak. Let it be the soft awareness that keeps you anchored. No matter what the world demands. The world may praise noise, but your soul thrives in stillness. The world may chase speed, but truth moves at the pace of presence. So move slowly. Love deeply. Listen completely. Let silence live inside everything you do. Because silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of meaning. It is the soundless hum of existence itself. The eternal rhythm that carries every heartbeat, every wave, every star, and every moment of you. When you live from that rhythm, life becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You no longer need to force understanding, because life reveals itself in time. You no longer need to chase love, because love reveals itself when you stop running. You no longer need to search for purpose, because purpose arises naturally from the stillness you've cultivated. And when you look back on your journey, on all the noise, the confusion, the loss, you will see how even those moments served you. They led you here, to this breath, to this silence, to this remembering. So, for a moment, don't rush to end this silence. Let it breathe with you. Let it settle into the space between your thoughts. Feel the weight of peace in your chest. Not heavy, but grounding. A quiet reminder that you belong here. That you are already whole. In the stillness, everything begins again. Every dawn. Every breath. Every act of love and awareness. Silence is not the end. It is the beginning. So go. Carry this stillness into the noise. Be the calm presence in a restless world. Be the light that needs no applause. Be the quiet soul who understands that peace is not found. It is remembered. And when the noise grows loud again, when life pulls you away, when you forget, just pause. Listen. Return to the silence. It will be there, waiting. As it always has been. As it always will be. Because silence, the truest teacher, never leaves you. It simply waits for you to listen again.